Okay, today we're recording this video to continue our discussion about speech articulation of sounds in children. Okay, so I think there are a few questions that maybe we'll be elaborating more on.
Yeah. So can you explain a little more of the developmental orders of different sounds?
Right, okay. What I meant is that there are different sounds in English. Okay, there are different letter sounds. If we think about, for example, the letters A to Z, the different sounds, bird sounds, kid sounds, and so forth. So we obviously don't expect, say, a child who's just talking at 1 or 2 to be able to say all the different sounds. So it's actually normal, for example, if a young 2-year-old is actually say talking about rabbit, it's normal for them to say wabbit. So they might not be able to manage the tongue movements necessary for an R sound, and they just use their lips. Okay, so it becomes more like a W sound, wabbit. So what I mean is that there are different sounds that develop at different stages, so that by the time a child is about 7, 6 and a half to 7, they should have practically all the sounds that you need in English. Okay, and this actually has to do with the oral motor control. So what happens is that, for example, we know the notion that children, develop physical skills. So they sit and then they crawl and then they walk. Okay, so we don't expect them to, for example, start walking if they're not very good at sitting yet. And we also understand the notion of things like what we call gross motor movements, big motor movements versus fine motor movements. Okay, so for the mouth muscles, what we use in order to produce sounds, the developmental order actually starts from outside in. So it's easier for children to actually make sounds to do with the lips. So they can go ah or ooh or or wow, sounds like that. And then it starts to move actually inside where they start to be able to control and move their tongue. So they start to be able to, for example, lift up their tongue for L sounds and lion. They start to be able to move their tongue towards the front, maybe for sounds like T and D, like turtle, daddy. Right? And then they also start to be able to move their tongue with different positions. So maybe more towards the back, so they can say things like, already there's a cool, good sounds, car, right? Something that a lot of children want to talk about. So it's about how the child actually starts to be able to move the tongue and the lips in different ways. So that's why, so these are the sounds that I was talking just now about, how the easiest sounds are those that are produced with the lips. So N sounds, m, 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 p, 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 p. And then we move on to the sounds I was talking about just now, T and D sounds, K and G sounds, t, t, d, d, g, g, k, k, things like that. And then later on, we move on to the next group of sounds where the tongue position has to be even more precise. So if you and I, for example, compare what we do for S sounds, like su versus, shu. So what we're doing is actually just making very small changes to how we position our tongue. So that's why those sounds come a little bit later, because the children have to be able to, learn to do that. All right. It's also similar to the situation where, if, for example, if we're learning a foreign language, it might be easy to think about it because for us, talking and producing sounds are something we do, it's second nature for us. We don't really have to think about it. But imagine if you're learning a foreign language, or let's say, say an American is trying to learn, Chinese or Mandarin. So they may have to learn some sounds that are new for them. Maybe things like, zhi, chi, shi, and zi, ci, si, sounds like that. So what they need to do is, first of all, to be able to hear the differences. All right, with some children or adults when they're learning a new set of sounds, even the listening is something that they need to work on. Because sometimes you may hear, what's the difference? You can't really hear it. And if you can't really hear the difference, it's hard for you to actually learn what to do in order to produce the sounds. And the next stage, a lot of listening, a lot of sound monitoring as well. So you need to listen, for example, if the teacher is saying, chocolate, and you go chocolate, I can't manage the sounds. The child has to be, again, have that degree of self-awareness, self-monitoring in order to be able to hear, listen to the teacher and compare the sounds.
So how can you tell if the child has mild or severe articulation disorders?
Right. So basically we look at, okay, are you able to understand the child? So for a child who may have just mild difficulties, you probably can work out what they're trying to say, just that it may not be very clear. Okay, in other cases where a number of sounds are affected, what may typically happen is that the child may say quite a number of different sounds all in the same way. So, for example, a sentence like, this is a soft chair with different sounds like S sounds in soft, CH sounds in chair, it may all come out the same way, did dot dot there, something like that. So it's going to be difficult for people to understand the child, especially if you don't know what they're talking about, or you can't see what the child is talking about. So typically that's something that can be more frustrating for the child as well. And it would also affect things like if they're learning, say, phonic sound for reading, because whereas their friends may be learning, okay, the letter R has the R sound, rabbit or red, okay, they may not be able to produce a sound. So for them, they might be learning, letter R is, red, something like the W sound instead. So it's going to affect how they think of sounds, how they recognize letter sounds and so forth. Okay, right. Okay, so I think we'll stop here for today. Maybe if there are any other questions or any other concerns that people have, they're welcome to write in, give us your comments so we can record more videos to tell you more about this topic. Okay, thank you.